Hello, if you are still there and listening. Um, so, I spent the last days quite devoted to, how does it go, the love of my life, which is not to be understood as a specific person because there's so much confusion right now. It's really hard to establish who is who and what is what and what it is all about. It is generally about other things, but probably due to all the changes, certain things which are essential, it's the most important, surface. So I invested quite a lot of energy recently because of my life actually. I have that sort of attitude. You'll probably get the recording with a totally different voice and even a totally different tone. That is quite unbearable, I must say. A complete separation of the spirit of the personality. Anyway, um, um, basically I busy myself with quite different things, and one of the things which are really important to me is the way of light, my way of light, and I've just made the recording in Polish to clear up a few things that get very much confused when universities start talking about Romanticism these days. A lot of ideas have been corrupted, and generally one can see that they are trying to create a trend which has to do with transhumanism. Um, I believe this is a communist tool for enslaving and submitting elites who want to be in the elite, so they agree to certain things, and then they can not do much, to be honest. Um, so I'm devoted to the truth, and I work on those ideas. This is of a spiritual value for me. And I'm just reading. Actually, I'm copying it to my own copybook, a text on Romanticism by Juliusz Kleiner, who is a Polish professor. It is, I don't think, I'll try to translate it as I read so that people who speak only English and don't speak Polish could get some orientation of the problem, the core problem actually in that area. So this is academic. The conflict between an individual, a special individual, and the world, and the apotheosis of the individual, the special, exceptional individual. The expected changes were to bring a betterment of the lot of people in general. At that time, there had been movements or trends preceding socialism: Fourierism, Saint-Simonism. That saw the purpose of the social evolution in happiness of the greatest number of the social strata or group that was most numerous, that had been most numerous, and most backward, or we could use the word retarded in a way, so far. It was followed, they were followed, the movements were followed by Marxist socialism. But the romantic dissatisfaction was individual, essentially. The world is bad because it does not correspond to the postulates of the exceptional individual. At the time when the disintegration of the social order made an individual feel liberated, but at the same time lonely. The basic problem became the meaning of the individuals, the importance of the individuals, or of the individual in general, the individual's attitude to the world, that is, to the whole, to all that is that he or she finds outside oneself, outside herself or himself. The individual's conflict with the world. In that conflict, the individual and the world are conceived as two parties on the same level. The individual is a force that balances all the reality existing outside the individual. When confronted, when the individuals strives or whatever the individual wants to achieve are confronted with the outside reality in opposition to the individual can constitute a higher value. The individual can have the right to demand that the world would correspond to his or her desires, but not understood in the sexual sense, perhaps also, but in Polish it does not have this connotation. So something the person really wants very much. The individual, it is even more rightful for the individual to complain and to revolt. The romantic revolt was expressed passionately by Byron, and the revolt, sometimes sounding as a false pose, lasted or was lasting in Byronism. At the break of the 18th and 19th century, there appeared a philosophy in which there was a place for formulating philosophical formulation of that relationship, paradoxical. Excuse me. I need to check the word yazi. I'm sitting in front of a laptop and smoking a cigarette and drinking water with raspberry juice. And right now I'm checking. I have not prepared it because I don't have time to write it down in English to prepare the whole translation, but just to give some orientation of the mess we are in terms of the brainwash we get from the academic point of view. I'm a graduate of the English Philology at Jagiellonian University. Okay, so according to a German philosopher Fichte, cosmos is a creation of the self, the original primary I, the primary force that is aware and creative, made the opposition or put against each other that is not the self. So there's the self and the I, and not I, not the self, or the not self. I don't know what's the philosophical term either, but this is the idea. What follows from that conception is that as far as the relationship between the self and the not self is concerned, the self is above the not self. Or not the self. Fichte talked about the absolute self, pre-self, which in his system occupied the place of God. He did not talk about the real separate individual that can be that can be an experience, a part that can be met in experience, experimentally, experientially. The romantic edit, however, made, however, a jump from the world-creating force to the reality of their own personal life. And the relationship between the real individual and the environment was conceived by him as if a relationship between the self and not the self. So there's the extreme individualization that is taking the individual out of the rest, and elevation of the individual, a sort of overgrowth. The basic romantic attitude is loneliness, being separate from what is outside the individual, the individuality. The essential conflict is the conflict between the individual and the world. Of course, it is not about every man, any man or woman. The romantic feels he's superior, exceptional as an individual, and is ready to fight only for the position of the individual. The romantic's individuality or individualism is not some general fight for human rights. This is an elite individualism. From a general loosening of law, which was characteristic for the epoch, the romantic would draw conclusions concerning his position above the law. He would revolt against all ties, he or she. But I think at the time there were still more men. No general rules or laws should design or direct his road or his way. No general rules that all are to abide by. He or she shouldn't be limited by what is happening in the world, or restricted. The self, the romantic self, is the measure according to which all is to be judged, evaluated, assessed. All is to be an opportunity for revealing, developing, and empowering the self. The self is not even ruled by the consequence. Freely and depending on a caprice, it can reveal itself on any occasion. The individualism, the elite individualism of the romantic, or of the Romanticism, was becoming an extreme individualism and an anarchic one. And because it takes me so much time, perhaps I will pause here. Maybe I make the translation, or perhaps I make some summary of the text, because it's really a very good text, though it's possible that it can arrive in chunks. So this is basically my way of life, which is quite different from what you normally hear when you hear about the way of life. I learn and create by the power of the Holy Spirit, and the overall outline for the Weight of Light that was created in 2019 it starts with the question, was the life of Jesus tainted by the death of the innocents? He never apologized for it. At least nothing of the kind is known to us. There must be more such questions in each religion. And generally, the way I want to develop this way, I want to develop this way along two ways of interacting with the with what I see as the possible food for the light to appear. One is creative and one is receptive. So on the receptive side, there's the reading of the holy books, holy writings, like the Bible, Holy Quran, but also Hinduism, Buddhism, and Judaism, of course, too. These are the 5 key religions for me, which are always present. So I have a flower that has the center and the petals go Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, and Hinduism. So Hinduism and Judaism are next to each other, and if you think of a circle or cycle or something like that, you want to envisage it that way, that's where you arrive at. And this is intuitive and experimental in a way, because I act on that intuition and I see what comes up. This is not satanistic in any way, because this is my general rule, that I believe that knowledge comes when it comes, so there are no violations. I would not eat the apple that was forbidden. Then we have classical literature, history, arts, there in music, philosophy, and languages. So these are foreign languages, of course the mother tongue, foreign languages, also the languages, the ancient languages, perhaps also other languages, that is by which I understand a system of signs that carry significances. So this is the reception, so this is what you devote your attention to, and some light can come through it. But then there's the creative part, the active part, because that is quite, of course you are active in that, but in a way it is passive because you receive. And the active part is lectures, so this is what one does. Lectures, also classical literature, so the literature you write, arts, fine arts, philosophy. Well, I would add music if I were able to compose it. But it's always fine arts, there in music, theater and so on. Philosophy, so creation of own philosophy, the description of the world, that is own description of the world, which can differ from what we get described and considered as a certain state of the art of the knowledge or science or whatever. Then meditations, so you have a subject and you just think of it and see what comes up and you write it down, or you can talk about it too. And dialogues, so this is a special technique that I use, or method, where you think of two or more persons taking part in a dialogue, but you become those people, so that the dialogue can appear. For example, when I was still attending holy masses, I had this idea of, well, I actually established it in my queendom, the order of Goldbergians. So this is basically about Christianity. We have all those doctrines and we have a certain perception of the life of Jesus Christ and the meaning of it all. And I thought that especially, I think especially in the recent pontificates, I don't know what you call it, but the time of the Pope, there has been much emphasis on the death and resurrection and the Eucharist, and I believe it is not correct. I believe that the focus should be on the teachings. So you can think of a dialogue between a Eucharistian and the Goldbergian, and you can create this dialogue, how they make their points. And I believe this is also the way of life. So I'm an academic, but I'm alive, so there's a lot of life generally. Agnieszka Justitia, the first of Honestia, and of course my queendom, normally called a kingdom, but I want to make this point. This is called a queendom because I want to make this point of the powerful female ruler, who is not a man. In Poland, there was a wonderful queen, Queen Jadwiga. She died when she was very young, but she was to marry Habsburg, and she wanted to marry Habsburg, but then the people decided that she should marry a much older man from Lithuania, and thanks to that Lithuania got Christian, So her name was Jadwiga, and she, from what I read, Habsburg ruined her reputation. He must have been really angry. After all, Habsburg and some guy from Lithuania. I mean, he might be a king, but you know. So she was called the king, not the queen. So she was the king. She was called the king. That's how I received it in history, and that is incorrect because it kills the female spirit. So that's why I called my kingdom a queendom. And of course it has nothing to do with sex. This is a monarchy. This is a new monarchy. The monarchy of the future. Agnieszka Justitia, the first of Honest.